It was a quiet evening on Long Island. Outside the gates of a sprawling waterfront estate, dozens of fans stood silently, their phones dimly illuminating tear-stained faces. The only sound came from a soft hum, a few voices singing the opening line of a song that had once filled stadiums. It's 9 o'clock on a Saturday. The world had loved Billy Joel for decades. His voice had told stories that felt like home. Songs of broken dreams, city lights, and ordinary people trying to find meaning. But lately, something felt different. Fans noticed that his eyes no longer carried the same spark, that his smile came slower, more fragile. And now, whispers spread faster than any melody he ever wrote. Social media overflowed with disbelief. Is Billy Joel okay? What happened to him? For many, Billy Joel wasn't just another musician. He was the soundtrack to their lives, the man who taught them how to survive heartbreak, how to laugh through pain, and how to dream even when the world turned dark. But behind the laughter, behind the thunderous applause and the legendary piano solos, was a truth so raw that even he couldn't hide it anymore. A truth that, once revealed, would leave every fan heartbroken. Because this time, the piano man wasn't playing for anyone else. He was playing for himself, one final silent song. Long before the world knew him as the piano man, he was simply William Martin Joel, a shy, curious boy born on May 9, 1949, in the Bronx, New York. His parents, Howard and Rosalind Joel, were from entirely different worlds. His father, a German-born classical pianist who fled Nazi persecution, carried the weight of a painful past. His mother, an English teacher from Brooklyn, was practical, warm, and determined to give her children stability. When Billy was only a few years old, the family moved to Hicksville, Long Island, a suburban escape from the chaos of the city. But what seemed like a peaceful life on the surface often hid quiet turbulence beneath. His father's passion for music filled their home, yet it also created tension. Howard Joel, a classically trained musician, expected discipline, precision, and perfection. Billy, however, found joy in improvisation, in bending the rules, creating his own rhythms, and turning structure into soul. When his parents' marriage began to crumble, music became his refuge. He'd sit for hours at the family piano, pressing keys softly so he wouldn't be noticed. The melodies became his language, his way of talking to a world that often didn't listen. After his parents' divorce, his father moved back to Europe, leaving a void that would shape Billy's emotional world for decades. The absence was more than physical, it was a silence that echoed through every song he would one day write. As a teenager, he faced the usual struggles of suburban youth: bullies, insecurity, and the pressure to fit in. He wasn't the athletic type. He was the kid who'd rather stay home, listening to Ray Charles, the Beatles, or Beethoven. But beneath the uncertainty, a spark was forming, one that would eventually ignite a career that no one, not even Billy himself, could have predicted. By his late teens, Billy Joel had already discovered where he truly belonged: on stage. He joined his first local group, the Echoes, later renamed the Lost Souls. They played high school dances, smoky bars, and small clubs around Long Island. He wasn't just the keyboard player, he was a storyteller, even when no one knew it yet. The 1960s were a time of rebellion and reinvention, and Billy's ambition mirrored that spirit. He bounced from one band to another. He wanted to say something that mattered. The early 1970s were not kind to him. After Attila collapsed, Billy found himself lost, creatively, emotionally, and financially. His first solo album, Cold Spring Harbor, 1971, was a disaster. Due to a mastering error, his voice was sped up, making the record sound unnatural. Critics mocked it. Sales flopped. The failure hit him harder than he let on. He'd poured everything into that record, every ounce of pain and hope, and it was ruined by a technical mistake. For a while, he stopped performing entirely. The pressure, the disappointment, the relentless feeling of inadequacy began to consume him. In 1970, at his lowest point, Billy tried to end his life by drinking furniture polish, an act of despair he would later describe with dark humor. "I figured it would clean me out." He survived, but the experience changed him forever. It was a breaking point, and a rebirth. He checked himself into a psychiatric hospital, and there, surrounded by others who had also reached their breaking points, he began to see things differently. Life, he realized, didn't owe him success. But maybe, just maybe, he owed the world his truth. That truth would soon take the form of a song. When Billy Joel released Piano Man in 1973, he wasn't expecting it to become the anthem it did. The song was born from his time performing at the Executive Room, a small bar in Los Angeles. He'd been hiding out under the stage name Bill Martin, playing for tips, trying to rebuild his life. Every night, he watched people: the waitress, the real estate novelist, the bartender, all chasing their dreams, all nursing their regrets. And as he sat behind that piano, he realized he was just like them. Over the next few years, Billy's career exploded. Albums like Street Life Serenade, 1974, and Turnstiles, 1976, built his reputation as a master storyteller. But it was The Stranger, 1977, that made him a legend. By the late 1970s, Billy Joel had everything: hit records, sold-out tours, Grammy Awards, and a devoted fanbase that spanned continents. He was on magazine covers, his songs filled the radio, and critics hailed him as one of the most gifted songwriters of his generation. Yet, amid the flashing lights and roaring crowds, Billy often felt an emptiness that no applause could fill. Behind the scenes, fame began to show its darker side. The constant touring drained him physically and emotionally. Nights blurred into mornings, and even the most glamorous stages felt cold once the spotlight dimmed. He once described the feeling as being alone in a room full of people. Relationships became complicated. Trust was hard to maintain, and the business side of music was unforgiving. Billy wasn't just an artist anymore. He was a product, expected to deliver hit after hit. In interviews, he'd smile and crack jokes, but those who knew him well could sense the fatigue. Fame had given him everything, but taken something, too. In the quiet of his home studio, he'd sit at the piano long after everyone else had gone, staring at the keys, wondering if he'd ever truly be happy again. The boy who once found freedom in music was now trapped by it. And though he didn't know it yet, the road ahead would test him more than fame ever had, leading to heartbreak, betrayal, and the kind of pain that even the greatest songs couldn't heal. By the early 1980s, Billy Joel had reached a height that few musicians ever dream of. Stadiums overflowed with fans who sang every lyric as if it were scripture. He was a global icon. The Piano Man had become a household name, and each record seemed to outshine the last. But behind the shimmering awards and platinum albums, a storm was brewing, one that would strike him harder than any critic ever could. At the time, Billy had entrusted nearly all his financial affairs to his brother-in-law, Frank Weber, who was not only his manager but a member of his family. It was a relationship built on love and trust, or at least that's what Billy believed. For years, he poured his energy into his art while Weber handled the business side. Then, in the mid-1980s, Billy discovered a shocking truth: millions of dollars were missing. His investments had been mismanaged, his funds diverted, and his trust betrayed. The man who had helped guide his career had been quietly draining it. It wasn't just about money. It was about faith. About loyalty. About how easily success can blind you to the people who claim to protect you. The betrayal sent Billy into a tailspin. Lawsuits followed, and though he eventually won in court, the damage was far deeper than financial. He became guarded, suspicious, withdrawn. The world that once felt full of opportunity now felt dangerous. In interviews years later, he admitted, "It wasn't the money that hurt me. It was the fact that someone I loved did that." The stress of the trial, combined with endless touring, began to weigh heavily on his body and spirit. Nights that were once filled with joy became hollow performances. The stage lights blinded him rather than lifted him. His songs, those anthems of defiance and love, now carried a tone of exhaustion, as if he was trying to convince himself that the music still mattered. As fame grew, so did isolation. Behind closed doors, Billy found himself surrounded by people, yet unable to find anyone he could truly talk to. The applause no longer felt comforting. It felt like a mask, one that hid the pain behind every smile. In one interview, a friend recalled, he'd play piano at home in the dark, no lights, no audience, just him and the keys. It was haunting. He wasn't playing for anyone anymore, just trying to remember why he started. By the mid-1990s, Billy Joel's once boundless energy began to wane. He had spent decades pouring himself into music, living at full speed and chasing perfection. But now, the fire that had once burned so brightly flickered under the weight of exhaustion and disillusionment. He continued to perform, but those closest to him noticed subtle changes. His movements slower, his voice softer, his eyes clouded by fatigue. It wasn't the weariness of age, it was something deeper, something that came from years of emotional scars never fully healed. The betrayal by his manager, the collapse of his marriage, the constant demands of fame, they had all left invisible wounds. Billy began to turn inward, and in those private, quiet moments, the man who once wrote songs of defiance started to wrestle with despair. Alcohol, which had once been a casual escape, became a more dangerous companion. Friends noticed his drinking increasing. He'd downplay it in public, joking about liking a good drink, but those close to him knew it was no longer about enjoyment, it was about forgetting. Over the years, several car accidents drew media attention. In 2003, he crashed his car into a tree on Long Island. Just 2 months later he crashed again, this time into someone's home. Each incident made headlines, each one feeding rumors about his health and well-being. Billy brushed them off with self-deprecating humor, but the truth was painful. He was struggling. His longtime friend and collaborator, Liberty DeVito, once said, "Billy's always been tough, but I think the world took more out of him than he'd ever admit." Despite it all, he kept returning to the stage. It was the one place where he still felt alive, where his pain could be transformed into something beautiful. His fans never saw the brokenness behind his smile. They just saw the legend, sitting at a piano, making them believe again. But behind the applause in the dressing room after the lights went down, he often sat in silence, staring at his hands, his fingers trembling slightly, as if remembering the price they had paid for every note. There was a haunting duality to Billy Joel at this point in his life. The public hero who gave joy to millions and the private man wrestling with shadows that refused to leave him. And as the years went on, those shadows began to follow him more closely. They lingered behind every song, every encore, every forced smile. And though the world celebrated his genius, few understood how much it cost him just to keep playing. By the end of the 1980s, Billy Joel had done what few artists could. He had conquered the charts for nearly 2 decades straight. His album Stormfront, 1989, produced massive hits like We Didn't Start the Fire and I Go to Extremes, proving that the Piano Man still had something to say in a new era of music. The record's energy, however, masked an underlying tension. The songs were frantic, almost breathless, a man trying to keep up with a world that refused to slow down. When River of Dreams arrived in 1993, fans noticed something different. It wasn't just another pop record, it was deeply spiritual, filled with biblical imagery, self-reflection, and weariness. The title track's chorus, "In the middle of the night, I go walking in my sleep," sounded like a man searching for peace in a life full of noise. Behind the music, Billy was tired. The years of betrayal, heartbreak, and public scrutiny had taken a toll. He'd lost faith not only in the music business but in some ways in himself. He spoke openly about creative burnout. "It's not that I couldn't write," he said. "It's that I didn't want to anymore. I didn't want to repeat myself. I said what I had to say." To fans, his decision to stop writing pop songs after River of Dreams came as a shock. For many, it felt like the world suddenly losing its narrator, the one who could turn pain into melody, heartbreak into poetry. But for Billy, it was necessary. He needed silence. He needed to rediscover who he was without the constant pressure to perform, to please, to produce. The haunting artwork of River of Dreams, painted by his then-wife Christy Brinkley, showed a surreal vision of a man drifting down a river beneath a starry sky, an image of motion, uncertainty, and surrender. It was prophetic. Billy Joel was drifting too, not toward fame, but toward something quieter, more personal. Years later, he admitted that the album was a farewell in disguise. "That was my last pop album," he said. "I didn't know it then, but I think part of me did." For a man who had given his life to music, silence was both strange and sacred. But it came with a cost: the loss of identity, the loss of purpose, and the creeping loneliness that only someone who once stood at the center of the world could understand. When Billy Joel retreated from the recording studio, many assumed he was enjoying the quiet life he had earned. But those who truly knew him understood that retirement from songwriting didn't mean peace, it meant isolation. He still performed, yes, but not in the same way. The concerts were less about promotion and more about connection, a ritual between him and his audience that reminded him who he was. Madison Square Garden became his sanctuary, a place where the Piano Man could still find comfort in the sound of thousands of voices singing his words back to him. Yet, even on stage, there were moments when he seemed far away. Between songs, he'd laugh, tell stories, crack jokes, but his eyes often betrayed something heavier. He carried the weight of years, not just physical age, but emotional fatigue. Friends noticed the shifts. There were periods where Billy withdrew completely, canceling appearances and refusing interviews. Rumors swirled about his health, his drinking, his mental state. In truth, it was all of those things, a cocktail of exhaustion, loneliness, and quiet sorrow. He had long battled depression. It wasn't something he hid from entirely, but he also didn't dramatize it. "I get sad sometimes," he once said. "It's part of being alive." But behind those words was a man still haunted by the same ghosts that followed him since childhood: abandonment, loss, fear of not being enough. The piano had always been his therapy, his confession booth. Now, it sometimes sat untouched for days. "I don't always want to play," he admitted in an interview. "Sometimes it hurts too much to hear what comes out." Still, when he did perform, something miraculous happened. No matter how heavy his burdens, his music lifted people. The crowd's energy, the shared nostalgia, the unity of thousands of strangers, it was healing, even for him. At Madison Square Garden, fans witnessed this paradox. a man visibly aging, visibly weary, but still capable of bringing life to every note. They didn't see a legend fading, they saw a soul still burning, even if dimly. In truth, Billy Joel's battle was not against fame or time, or even his demons. It was against silence, the terrifying quiet that followed every ovation. As Billy Joel entered his 70s, he began to see his legacy from a distance, like a man walking back through a museum of his own life. There were awards, records, sold-out tours, but what he cherished most were not the numbers.
It was the people.
The faces in the front row, the kids who grew up on his songs, the older fans who danced to them at their weddings. In interviews, Billy began to speak more softly about legacy, family, and forgiveness. He remarried in 2015 to Alexis Roderick, and the couple welcomed 2 daughters, Della Rose and Remy Ann. Becoming a father again late in life changed him. The once restless performer found a gentler rhythm. He called them my encore. Fatherhood gave him a reason to stay grounded, a reason to keep living well. When I'm with my girls, he said, it's like being in a song that never ends.
But he couldn't ignore time.
At 76, he felt his body slowing down. His voice wasn't as strong, his stamina wasn't what it used to be. Yet he continued to perform month after month, because music was his way of saying thank you, to life, to fans, to the piano that had never left his side. There were moments during his garden shows when he'd stop mid-song, smile wistfully, and say, "You know, I thought I'd be done by now." The audience would laugh, but there was truth in his words. He was still here, still singing, still reaching for something that even he couldn't name. In his later interviews, Billy spoke candidly about mortality. Not with fear, but with an artist's acceptance. You spend your whole life trying to make sense of what you've done, he said. And then one day, you realize it doesn't need to make sense. It just needs to be honest. His honesty was his legacy. Every lyric, every chord, every confession hidden between verses, they told the story of a man who had lived, lost, and loved deeply. And even as he began to hint at slowing down, there was no bitterness. Only gratitude. Because for Billy Joel, the real reward was not fame. It was the simple, eternal truth that his music would outlive him. In recent years, fans began to notice what Billy never publicly announced, that his once boundless energy was fading. Some shows were quietly cancelled.
Others postponed.
The official reasons were simple: illness, fatigue, scheduling. But for those who had followed him for decades, it was more than that. His voice had grown softer, his movements slower. His piano solos, though still beautiful, carried a fragility that broke hearts. At 76, the Piano Man was showing signs of wear, and the world held its breath. Videos from his concerts began circulating online. Moments where Billy paused during a song, closing his eyes for just a little too long, as if lost somewhere far away. The audience cheered louder, trying to lift him. He smiled faintly, sometimes even laughed, but behind the grin was a visible ache. Speculations spread quickly.
Was it health? Was it age? Was it something deeper?
But Billy Joel said nothing. He never explained. He never complained. He simply kept showing up, even if a little slower, even if a little quieter. That was who he was, the man who never quit playing, even when his hands trembled. In an interview, a close friend said, "Billy doesn't want sympathy. He just wants people to listen. That's all he's ever wanted." There was something haunting about watching him perform Vienna in those final tours. The song, once written as a reminder to slow down and appreciate life, had become prophetic. When he sang, "Vienna waits for you," it felt less like advice and more like acceptance. For the audience, it was devastatingly beautiful. For Billy, it was a farewell in motion. The piano that had once roared with youthful energy now sang softly, almost like a whisper, but that whisper carried more truth than any loud applause ever could. Because when the music finally slows down, what remains is the soul of the man who played it. Raw, fragile, and eternally human. There's a strange poetic rhythm to the way Billy Joel's life has been marked by heartbreak. It's as if the universe kept handing him verses of loss, and he turned them into melodies that spoke to millions. But behind the familiar chords of "Just the Way You Are" or "The Defiance of My Life" lies a man who spent decades quietly nursing the wounds of disappointment, betrayal, and heartbreak, both personal and professional. In the early years, it was family that broke first. When Billy was just a boy, he watched his father leave, an absence that would echo through every lyric about loneliness, yearning, and reconciliation. That loss carved into him a void so deep that even fame couldn't fill it. He would later admit that many of his songs were attempts to talk to his father through music, to reach across that silence. As his career soared, another heartbreak followed: betrayal. His trusted manager, and former brother-in-law, had mishandled millions of dollars of his fortune. Billy had spent years writing songs about the working man, the dreamers, the ordinary people who gave everything to survive. And then, he found himself nearly broken by someone he trusted most. It wasn't about the money, he once said, his voice tight with quiet anger.
It was about faith. About trust.
But it wasn't just business that hurt him. Love, too, had its way of leaving him shattered. Billy's marriages, each beginning with hope and poetic promises, ended in silence and pain. His second wife, supermodel Christy Brinkley, had been his muse, the woman who inspired one of his most beautiful love songs, Uptown Girl. To the world, they were the perfect couple. To Billy, they were a duet slowly falling out of harmony. When it ended, he didn't rage or blame, he wrote. Each ballad became a confession, every melody a letter he couldn't send. He once said in an interview, "Every song I wrote was a goodbye to something I lost." And maybe that's the essence of Billy Joel's music, a collection of goodbyes that never really ended. By the time he reached his later years, the heartbreaks had shaped him into something both fragile and resilient. He was no longer the angry young man of the late 70s. He was a man who had seen life in its rawest form, who had built, lost, and rebuilt not only his career but his soul. Each time he sat at the piano, he didn't just play, he remembered. It was a night that would later be replayed in millions of minds, not because of the songs, but because of the silence. Madison Square Garden, the place Billy Joel had made his second home, was packed beyond capacity. The energy was electric, as always. People of all ages, from those who grew up in the 70s to those who discovered him through their parents' records, filled the seats, waiting for that familiar man in black to walk out to his piano. When the lights dimmed, a roar swept the arena. Billy smiled, took his seat, and began with the haunting opening of Summer Highland Falls. His voice, though slightly roughened with age, carried a weight that seemed to pull every heart in the room closer. Midway through the set, something changed. He paused between songs, staring down at the keys for a long moment. The audience grew quiet, sensing something they couldn't quite name. Billy then whispered something, too soft to be caught on microphones. A few in the front rows swore they heard him say, "This might be the last one." When he launched into Piano Man, the crowd sang every word, tears rolling down faces illuminated by stage lights. It wasn't just a performance, it was communion, a shared moment between an artist and the generations he'd raised on his songs. And then, as the final notes faded, Billy lingered. His hand rested on the piano, trembling slightly. The applause thundered, but he didn't rise. He looked out over the audience one last time, his eyes wet, his lips forming a small, private smile. Then, without a word, he pressed one last key, a soft, lingering note that echoed through the arena like a farewell. That night, people didn't leave the concert talking. They left silent, as if they had just witnessed something sacred, something ending. The next morning, headlines flooded the world. Social media lit up with disbelief and sorrow. The words Billy Joel trended across every platform, not for a scandal, but for something far more human. Fans everywhere described the performance as otherworldly, final, like a goodbye we didn't want. Outside his Long Island home, fans gathered with candles, flowers, and handwritten letters. Some played Vienna, softly on portable speakers. Others sang New York State of Mind, as tears rolled down their cheeks. Across the globe, tributes poured in. Elton John wrote, "Billy's songs were the soundtracks of our lives." His genius was not just in melody, but in the honesty that came with it. Bruce Springsteen called him America's piano poet, a man who found poetry in pain. Music stations devoted entire days to his work, replaying interviews and concerts. Even those who weren't lifelong fans felt the magnitude of his legacy. There was a collective understanding that an era, defined by sincerity, melody, and storytelling, was closing. But perhaps the most moving reactions came from those who had seen him live. They spoke of how he had looked, tired but luminous, aged yet timeless. Some described the concert as if Billy had been saying goodbye not to fame, but to life itself. Sales of his music surged overnight, not from curiosity but from devotion. People weren't buying Billy Joel records, they were reclaiming a part of themselves. The world wasn't just mourning an artist. It was mourning a piece of its own past. Weeks later, those closest to Billy began sharing glimpses of the life he left behind. Fragments of handwritten notes, torn pages from journals, and unfinished lyrics left on his piano. His longtime friend and bandmate revealed that Billy often wrote late into the night, scribbling reflections on fame, regret, and the strange loneliness of success. One note, dated only a few months before his final show, read, "I spent my whole life writing songs to make sense of it all. Maybe that's the real trick, to keep asking questions you'll never answer." Another page carried the beginnings of a song. No title, just words. There's a light in the hallway / I left it on for me / so if I ever find my way home / I'll know where I should be. Those lines, raw and unfinished, felt like a parting gift, an echo of the man who spent decades searching for home in every song he wrote. His daughters spoke softly during interviews, their voices trembling with both grief and pride.
He was more than a legend, one said. He was Dad.
He'd sit by the window at night with a glass of wine and play something beautiful, and never tell us what it was. Maybe those were his prayers. Inside his Long Island mansion, the piano where he composed most of his greatest works now sits in silence. The sheet music still rests on the stand, open to a song that was never finished. It's a haunting image, the man who gave the world so much music leaving one final note unwritten. But maybe that's fitting. Because Billy Joel's story was never about perfect endings, it was about the courage to keep singing, even when the song hurt too much to finish. For all the fame, the platinum records, and the sold-out arenas, Billy Joel was never a man who let success define him. To those who knew him best, he was not the piano man or the entertainer. He was simply Billy, funny, stubborn, deeply thoughtful, and often lost in his own world of melodies and memories. His friends described him as a man of quiet contradictions. One moment, he'd fill a room with laughter, cracking jokes, doing impressions, mimicking his old bandmates. The next, he'd fall silent, staring into space as if chasing a tune only he could hear. He had this incredible sense of humor, recalled his longtime drummer Liberty DeVito. But there was always something behind it. You could see it in his eyes, that sadness, that thinking. Like he was trying to make sense of something that never quite made sense. Those who spent time with Billy in his later years noticed how he'd become more reflective. Fame no longer thrilled him, applause didn't fill him the way it once had. He spoke more often about gratitude, about forgiveness, and about the strange peace that comes when you've seen every side of life, the glory and the grief. He adored his daughters, often calling them the greatest songs he ever wrote. At home, he wasn't the global superstar. He was the father who cooked Sunday dinners, played lullabies on the piano, and gave his children advice in lyrics instead of lectures. In one particularly touching interview, his daughter Alexa Ray said, "He never tried to be perfect. He just wanted to be real. He taught me that beauty isn't in the spotlight, it's in the honesty of what you create." And maybe that was Billy's greatest gift. Beneath the spotlight, beneath the grand piano and the thunderous applause, was a man who had the courage to live truthfully. He didn't pretend to be a hero. He just told his story, and in doing so, told everyone else's too. When the world said goodbye to Billy Joel, something extraordinary happened. His music began to live louder than ever. Radio stations from New York to Tokyo filled the airwaves with Vienna, scenes from an Italian restaurant, Only the Good Die Young, and Piano Man. Each song felt renewed, as if Billy had found a way to speak through the static of grief and remind everyone that his voice could never be silenced. Elton John, his longtime friend and occasional tour partner, said in an emotional tribute, "Billy had that rare thing, truth. Every lyric, every note came from someplace real. You didn't just listen to him, you felt him. That's what makes his music eternal." Bruce Springsteen performed New York State of Mind at one of his concerts, pausing afterward with tears in his eyes.
"He was one of us," he said.
He gave the working class a melody. Even younger artists, from John Mayer to Lady Gaga, shared how Billy's work had shaped them. Gaga, who grew up listening to his records in her parents' New York home, called him the voice of every dreamer who ever got lost in the city. Across the country, candlelight vigils turned into sing-alongs. In parks, at bars, and in quiet living rooms, people gathered around pianos, playing Piano Man not as a performance, but as a prayer. At his official memorial, a single grand piano stood center stage beneath a spotlight.
No one played it that night.
Instead, the crowd sang for him. Thousands of voices, unaccompanied, filled the arena with the chorus he had written half a century earlier. "Sing us a song, you're the Piano Man." It was not a goodbye. It was a promise that the music would never die. The image of Billy Joel, hunched slightly over his piano, fingers moving gently across the keys, has become more than a memory.
It's a symbol now. Of resilience. Of artistry.
Of the kind of beauty that comes from pain. Cinematically, it's easy to imagine. A dark stage, a single spotlight, the faint sound of a piano echoing as his voice narrates from somewhere unseen. He played for the broken, the voice would say, because he was one of them. That was Billy's gift, to turn sorrow into sound, loneliness into melody, heartbreak into something you could sing along to. His songs didn't offer solutions, they offered understanding. And long after he left the stage for the last time, those echoes continued to ripple outward. Young musicians studied his compositions not just for their structure, but for their soul. Songwriters listened to his lyrics for lessons on truth. Even non-musicians found in his story a reflection of their own. The reminder that sometimes, surviving is its own kind of art. In the end, Billy Joel didn't need statues or awards to define his legacy. The real monuments are the pianos in small-town bars, the voices in crowded subway stations singing his songs, the people who still hum his melodies when life feels too heavy to bear. Because that's where his spirit lives, not in fame, but in the quiet, persistent music of everyday people. If Billy Joel's story touched your heart, don't forget to like this video, subscribe to our channel, and turn on the notification bell, so you never miss our next video about the legends who shaped our world.